Next thing we're going to talk about, worst jobs in college football. Now, couple preferences before I get into my list here. One, this is Power 4 only, okay? This is not going to be, like I said, I think I said in the intro, this is not going to be UMass, Kent State, none of that. We're doing Power 4 teams. Second thing is I tried to include one team. No, I didn't try. I did. I included one team from each conference. Okay, there's five on the list. One team, each conference, Power 4 conference is represented. So just know that. 3, the criteria you got to think is history. History is a program. That's part of it, not all of it. What I kind of project you to be going forward in the next 5 to 10 years. That's something, location, where you are, just all that stuff. The money, like how much money you have compared to other teams, where, all of that goes into it. Okay. It's all jumbled up, put it in the bowl, stir it around. And this is the 5 teams that I got. Okay. Again, I'd love to see your list if you have a list. If you don't, then don't say anything. All right, here we go. Big reveal. Top 5 worst jobs. I'm going to go 5-1 on this one. 5-1. Number 5, I got Stanford. Now, Stanford, one of the things that I probably should have preferenced a second ago is like, or maybe I did, in the conference where you're on now. Stanford's in the ACC now, okay? So first of all, your travel schedule is absolutely brutal, okay? Unless you're playing California or a home game, the closest you can be in a conference game is SMU, which is Dallas, Texas. So that's not where you want to be, right? 2, the academic standards at Stanford are insane, if you didn't know. It's like one of the hardest schools to get into, okay? So sure, that's all fine and dandy, and, that's a nice stamp for them, outside of football. But to get good college football players to get into your school, that's the whole thing. Maybe people don't think about that, but that's a thing. And then 2, 3, John Harbaugh and David Shaw had Stanford at a good spot for a while, right? But you've got to really think about that for a second, right? John Harbaugh is the head coach of Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers now. He was the head coach of Michigan, right? Won a national championship. He was the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers before that. So that's a really good head coach, right? And then David Shaw, I'm not sure where he is nowadays, but he was wildly renowned as a very good head coach as well. He was getting NFL offers, I remember back in the day when he was still coaching. So it took 2 head coaches to get them to the pinnacle of where they've ever been, right? And a guy like Andrew Luck and guys like Christian McCaffrey. They have not been back ever since. So they had some good years, but overall, they're not really one of the top programs. And I think it's just a really tough job to have right now. Number 4, I got Mississippi State. Like I said, I had to include each conference. Okay, that was my rule is I'm going to include each conference here. Now, a lot of people were like, well, Vandy is obviously, been one of the worst jobs in the SEC. Okay, let me ask you something. Would you rather live in Nashville, Tennessee or Starkville, Mississippi? I'm just asking. I'm asking. If you want to live in Starkville, Mississippi, you go ahead. I do not. Okay, that's number 1. Before Dan Mullen, this team was never good, okay? Before Dak Prescott. And here's one thing. When you think about Mississippi State football, okay, can you give me one win that you remember being like, that was the moment Mississippi State got put on the map? No. You can think about that one time that they were ranked high at number 1, and then what happened? They lost all their important games. They were 9-0 one season, and then they lost every important game they had to play that year. So Mississippi State has never really been up there. Mike Leach and Dan Mullen gave them some really good years, but they're not a good spot. They're 23rd most losses ever in college football. You're number 2 in your own state, and you're in your Mississippi. Mississippi State, and I think in terms of going forward, I don't like Jeff Lebby, good offensive mind. I just don't think in terms of where we are now, Mississippi State is going to ever be good. I just don't think they will. I think the resources and everything else, everyone else has way better than you. Baseball school only. Number 3, I got Kansas. Again, every conference has to be represented, so this is my Big 12 representative. This one really hinges hard on the history of Kansas football, okay? They have not been as bad recently, but not as bad recently as they won 9 games a couple years ago, and they've won 6 games, and then they've won 5 games. Okay, that's the best Kansas has done since the one time they went 11-1 or 12-1, whatever it was, back in 08, 07 with Mark Managoli. I'm not saying his name right, the big fat guy that had him. You remember, if you remember 7 season. But look, Kansas State's not a great team either, and they're probably still better than Kansas in terms of football programming in their own state. The last 10 years, Kansas has 36 wins. So that means they've won 3 games in the last per season, 3.5 games per year. Not good. And look, they're doing a lot of stuff out there at Kansas to, make their football team look cool and look better, bring back the location. Tough place to sell. Okay? Basketball, they got it going on. No doubt about it. Not football. Number 2, I got Boston College. Not a good team. And this one really preferences on the future. Okay? Because they're not historically that bad of a team. Like they've been flirting with 7 wins, 6 wins. They've been to a bunch of bowl games in the last 10 to 15 years. But they have Bill O'Brien. Now say what you want about Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien was once an NFL head coach, resurrected Penn State back in the day. And then before that, they had Jeff Hafley, who's now the head coach of Miami, the Miami Dolphins. And both of those guys can't do shit with this team. It's a terrible location. You're in Boston. You're in Boston. No one cares about college athletics in Boston. Okay, that is a pro town. And and you talk about going forward, it is going to be hard, very hard to sell. And a lot of these teams, they're stepping stone teams. If you get any good player at any one of these teams, they're going to leave. Same thing with the coaches. And that brings me to number 1, Purdue. Purdue since 2013. Okay, here we go. 1-11, 3-9, 2-10, 3-9. All right. They hired Jeff Brom. 7-6, 6-7, 4-8, 2-4, 9-4, 8-6. Jeff Brom leaves. 4-8, 1-11, 2-10. So they the best team they ever had. They went 9-4, and then they went 8-6, 9-4 with the postseason win. So they were 8-4, and then 8-6. They went to the Big Ten championship that year. In that Big Ten East or West, whatever it was, when like every team sucked, you knew what it was because Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State were all in one division. 27th most losses of all time. And it used to be Indiana was the worst team in the state. Well, now they've got to compete with Indiana in their own state for worst football team, and they're way behind. Look, they're in the Big Ten. They're not going to be good at football for a very long time, no matter how hard they try. This is the worst job in college football. I don't think it's an argument. I put up a reply. Shout out Tom DiNatale. He put this one as I put a reply Instagram story. He said Purdue, worst one. Caleb said Rutgers. I think Rutgers is, it could be considered up there as one of the worst jobs, but you're not really in a football town. I mean, New Jersey, whatever. I don't know. But I think Rutgers still can get talent because of where you are. And I think, has put out some okay teams, and I think project-wise, you can still win some games at Rutgers. You're not going to win games at Purdue, Boston College, Kansas, Mississippi State, or Stanford. It's just the proof. So those are my 5 worst jobs in college football. Love to hear your list if you got one. If you don't, well, then I don't want to hear your opinion.